On today's show, the San Diego Padres, after a whole 48 hours of absolute misery, frankly, 72 hours of absolute misery, they head up to play the lovely Atlanta Braves, and I'm being joined by a special guest to cover them. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to an edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Friday, May 17th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes, occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You may be familiar with my baseball-related work over at Just Baseball, where I write about not just the Padres, but general baseball stuff, as well as host a podcast about general baseball tomfoolery and chicanery and silliness called Baseball versus the World, which you could check out. And of course, check me out on Twitter at Javipeno, Javiiipeno. Today's episode, guys, is going to be a fun one. We are talking with Jake Mastroianni of Locked On Braves to preview this upcoming series. We basically talk about some of the biggest things for both teams, the Braves offense being super inconsistent, and then the Padres as a whole being very, very inconsistent. So it's a lot of fun. We get into all of that. We get into some pitching matchups too. And let me tell you, in the first segment, I lose it a little bit. You'll be able to see. I can't help it. Like, I start losing it, and this team is so frustrating that they drive me nuts. And that's just where we're at, ladies and gentlemen. Before I intro to you, though, to Jake, I just want to say today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers, you can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Just like that. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And let's get started with our buddy Jake. It's a good one. Stay tuned.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. And welcome to Locked On Padres as well. It's a crossover episode. I got Javier Reyes joining me from Locked On Padres, so it's going to be a great time and a fun conversation. If you're new to either podcast, make sure you hit that subscribe button and that thumbs up button on YouTube. You're listening on the audio version. Thank you so much for your support as well. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, whether that be Locked On Braves or Locked On Padres. Looking forward to this discussion today. Love doing these crossover episodes, and Javi is just the best, so I cannot wait to talk to him about what's going on with his Padres as we get ready for this 4-game set in Atlanta over the weekend. Before we do that, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, Javi, want to thank you for jumping on here. I know it's been a bit of a rough week over there for your Padres. We'll get into it, but I love the chance anytime we have to have you on and discuss with baseball, Padres specifically with you.
Absolutely, man. And for those who don't know, longtime listeners, Jake was the first guest before he was part of Locked On. I bring this up literally every time we do a crossover. This was back when you weren't with Locked On, and I believe it was the beginning of the pandemic. I had you on the show to talk about Padres. And for those who need more, proof of Jake's brilliance, this man was early on the Jake Cronenworth hype train. I remember that. That was one of your takeaways. So, man, it's always a pleasure to talk, even if when it is, for me lately, not a pleasure to actually talk about the Padres.
Yeah, I mean, it's very rare that a team, makes a trade with the Rays and they get something good out of it. But Cronenworth's been one of those, and he's having a much better year. I know he's been hot as of late for the Padres. But Javi, I kind of titled this. These are two teams, in my opinion, that are looking for consistency, but kind of in different ways. The Atlanta Braves just haven't had the consistency offensively that we come to expect from them, and Braves fans are still kind of waiting on that to happen. For the Padres, it's just consistency overall. Like, how do you win series against the Reds, the Diamondbacks, and the Dodgers, and then you get swept by the Rockies? Like, I don't understand this Padres team, and I look at it and I see a lot of talent over there, especially the past couple of years, but it's just, I look at the record and it doesn't quite translate with what I'm seeing on paper. So is that, and that's just an outsider's perspective, but is that kind of how you see it as well? It's just a team that can't consistently play good baseball.
Yeah, I mean, that's been the case of the team in the AJ Preller era, I feel, overall, especially these past few years, where this is just a nucleus, a core that you don't trust. You don't trust them to be able to perform like you just said, consistently. And I think that with them, I talked about this on my show from 2 days ago, or from yesterday, actually, about the team, where I ranted about just like, when you keep having moments like this, when you keep having inexplicable. So, for example, the Padres, what everyone said, they need another bat. You know what I mean? They lost Juan Soto. You still need to try and find another bat. Okay, Merrill's good, but even still, you need another bat. You might need another starting pitcher. You lost Blake Snell. They didn't just get replacements for those two. They got the best replacements. You get Luis Ariz. You get Dylan Cease, who's a Cy Young contender. And then, by the way, Jurickson Profar has basically become, albeit to a smaller degree, Juan Soto, right? That's how good he's been this year. You got the bounce back from Jake Cronenworth, as I had tweeted the other day. And yet, you still find ways to lose. Jake, they're even first in high leverage situations offensively this year in terms of WRC plus. That was the number one thing they were horrible at last year, was that they couldn't hit with runners in scoring position. They're one of the 3 worst teams in the last 27 years in terms of like clutch rating and stuff like that. And they've amended a lot of that, and yet they still find ways to lose. And I know that everyone wants to bring up Manny Machado and Xander Bogaerts and Fernando Tatis Jr., especially the former two. But it's more than that. And me, fundamentally, I think that it's an organizational issue. You don't just have this stuff happen year after year. You don't keep having this situation where guys underperform against one of the 3 worst teams since you and I have been hosting our shows in the Colorado Rockies, and they get swept. And by the way, it was like insane. Game 1, last 3 innings, you need 1 more run in order to come back. It happens. Sometimes you fall behind. You get 8 walks from Rockies pitchers across those last 3 innings, and you don't get 1 hit. Like, that's insane. Machado swings on the first pitch, ground double play. How does he follow that up? In game 2, first pitch, twice, Jake. He grounds into a double play on the first pitch the very next day to follow it up. And then the third game, all right, we got to salvage this. They get shut out. And Michael King, who just made history against the Los Angeles Dodgers. See, I'm already getting revved up. I can't help myself. Just made history against the Dodgers, going 7 2/3, striking out 12, a lineup that has certifiably 3 Hall of Famers in it already. Never mind the Teoscar Hernandez, all-star caliber players. Does well against them, gets completely lit up by the Rockies, and it's not like it was in Coors. So this team, I think fundamentally it's a reflection of the organization, and I don't think it's necessarily ownership. I think ownership is honestly, usually in sports, Jake, pretty simple. Let us spend money, the end. All right, cool, you're a good owner. That's it. That's all we ask for, and don't meddle too much in the personnel, what they do. Obviously, you can decide who to hire, but after that, it's like, you don't want to be David Tepper of the Carolina Panthers right now. You know what I'm saying? You don't want to be that, or convincing your staff not to take the guy who might be the second coming of God in CJ Stroud, right? So there's that. Obviously, being hyperbolic on my part, but yeah, it's been really frustrating. The Padres offense this year has bounced back, but they're not getting it from Machado and Bogaerts at all. And Tatis, while he's shown some flair, was really big in a couple comebacks this year, he hasn't found the consistency where you're showing us why you're one of the best players in the league. That hasn't happened either. So it's just been frustrating throughout, man. It's just,
yeah, no, I feel that. And hearing you talk, and, like I said, I'm a casual observer of the Padres. I do, I root for them in that NL West. They're probably my favorite team out there, just because there is so much star power and there's so many, exciting players on that team that make it fun to watch. But it's just, again, I turn it on and you're losing to the Rockies, or, you win a couple of games and you got a winning record. Looks like maybe you got a chance, and then you drop and you have a 10-week or a 10-day stretch where you go 3-7 or something like that. And, you look at it and you look at the record and where they are, 22-24, just a couple games under 500, a +4 run differential. And again, there's still a lot of time left, but it feels like a mediocre team to me on paper. And it shouldn't be that. And I know they're in a tough division. Obviously the Dodgers, they've already clinched the NL West out there, with what they're doing. But again, it's frustrating for me just from a fan standpoint, because I feel like that team should be better. And I think it's kind of scary as a Braves fan, because who knows what Padres team is going to show up this weekend, And that's the thing. They just got swept by the Rockies, but it's still so much talent. If they put it together and play some good games, they could easily come in and take this series from the Braves, because they are that talented. And again, just kind of speak to your point, I think that's what's so frustrating about this team. It's just they can be so good. They can beat teams like the Dodgers, but then they just fall back and lose to teams like the Rockies. And you talked about the moves that they made. It's kind of a head scratcher in the offseason. You trade Juan Soto, which, I kind of get, it's a rental player, want to try to get some of that value back for him. But then you go out and get a Dylan Cease and you make a trade for him. And then you go out and get a Luis Arraez. And it's kind of a confusing. Are you selling? Are you buying? Mm-hmm. And again, now here we are in the season, and who knows what's going to happen the next couple of months? Are they going to be sellers or buyers at the trade deadline? We don't necessarily have to get into that, but it's just a confusing front office. Like you said, I know AJ Preller and that staff, they've done a great job of bringing in talent. They've traded away all these prospects, and I just feel like there's still more coming. And I feel like they've done a great job in that regards. But again, just even looking at it from a front office perspective, still it's hard to figure out kind of what this team is doing. Are they selling? Are they buying? Are they in? Are they out? It's just kind of confusing.
Yeah, it's a lot, man. And yeah, some of your listeners might say, oh, well, everyone drops a series every now and then. Well, the Padres are 2 games below 500. So if they had a good record and you got swept by the Rockies, it's easier to laugh that off and be like, that's baseball. Like the Atlanta Braves literally can win a World Series and they might lose a series to the A's the very first thing of the season, right? That's totally something that can happen. But with the Padres, it's like you just said, that's perfect way to explain it, man. Just which version of the team. So while everything I've said sounds like, wow, they're going to get killed this weekend, they could sweep the Braves. I'm not kidding. Yeah. And then the very next week, they could get swept by the Marlins. That's the type of team I'm talking about here. Now, they've had their weirdness against the Rockies. And by the way, to address even further my point that I think it's an organizational front office issue and not maybe getting the best out of your players, maybe not having the best training staff, is they've been bad against the Rockies for like 3 years now. So that's not, everyone has had a weird season. I imagine the Braves have that one weird team that for some reason they can't beat. But one of the worst teams in the entire sport, one of the worst organizations in the entire sport, you're 8-11 against them in 2021, 9-10 against them the year after. You were finally good against them last year. Congratulations. You just stunk against everybody else. And this year they're 2-5. Like, what's going on? You know what I mean? So to me,
those are the teams you have to beat. If you want to make the postseason, you got to win those games,
It's depressing, man. It's really depressing. And it's amazing that if I told Padres fans, Jake Cronenworth would be about as good as Freddie Freeman, if not better, to start the season. Jurickson Profar for $1 million on 1 year would be a 400. He'd be third in on base percentage in Major League Baseball. If I told you Dylan Cease not only would be on the Padres, but would revert to his Cy Young type of form that he's always showed that he can be. If I told you that Darvish was going to have a really good stretch and be healthy. If I told you that Jackson Merrill would come in and immediately be a really high quality rookie at a position that they've been struggling with in center field for so long, you'd be in. If I told you Robert Suarez would be not just a good replacement for Josh Hader, but better than Josh Hader, at least thus far through the season, you'd be like, oh, okay, well, let me guess. They're not hitting with runners on base. No, they're actually the best in the league at that. Then what's wrong? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, it's insane. It's absolutely insane, man.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's frustrating. Like I said, you look at that team and even you look at some of the stats and you think, okay, they're probably still in the race with the Dodgers in the NL West, even as good as they've been, but they're 7 games back. They're 2 games under 500. It's really hard to explain. I want to get into more of this conversation. I'm going to turn things over to Javi here next and let him ask me some questions, and we'll get into the pitching matchups for the series coming up this weekend. We'll get into all of that here next. I want to tell you, get supplies from the site that's made for skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining supplyhouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/T-M and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. All right, Javi, get back into the conversation here. I want to turn things over to you, let you ask me some questions about the Braves.
Yeah, and thankfully give everyone a break from me for a second. You know what I mean? But when it comes to the Braves, the fun part about being a Braves fan, I imagine, is that even when you have underperforming players, your team doesn't just find ways to lose. So congrats on that. But in terms of the individual players, I think is the question. And I know that not everything has been great, and I imagine you've talked about this ad nauseum. But for my listeners, Ronald Acuna Jr. Just not having a great year so far. 100 or so WRC plus, like a little bit above that. I think he's been stealing bases, but I think he got caught like 4 times in 2 games, something like that. It just doesn't seem like he's the same guy from last year. Do you think that last year, while he's a great player, do you think that last year's MVP 9-win season was more of an anomaly? And he's just a really, really, really good player, especially given the contract value. And you think that that's just kind of his destiny instead?
Yeah. I'm a firm believer in Ronald. I think he's going to be an MVP type talent for a long time. But it's hard to look at what he's done so far this year and to look at the year that he had after the ACL injury. And now the year in between those two seems to be the anomaly a little bit. Again, it's still very early in the season. It's hard to really pinpoint exactly what's going on this year. It wasn't an excuse. It was a reality. In 2022, after coming off the ACL injury, he just didn't have the trust in that knee. He didn't have the power that we were used to. And so we all kind of understood that season. It was just one where he was working his way back. And then we thought, the next year after that, he's fully healthy. He's going to look like himself, what we thought he could be. And he did. An MVP type season, a 170 WRC plus, like you said, a nine war type of season, just unbelievable, historic season in many ways. And coming into 2024, we believed, and again, still early, that we would see more of the same and just see that continue. But now he's kind of regressed back to that 2022 self after the ACL injury. And so you wonder, for me, I don't think it's a loss of talent. The kid is still 26 years old. I don't think he's all of a sudden just lost talent. So to me, I wonder, okay, is he tired? He played all last year. He played in winter ball. He never really stopped. And, coming in spring training. And then he had the injury, the scare with his knee in spring training that cost him some time there. So is he just not fully trusting that knee again? What's going on? And look, Brian Snitker gave him a day off Wednesday, and giving players a day off is just not something that the Braves do. Their guys go out there 162 and play. But he essentially alluded to the fact he looked down in the dugout and the kid looked tired. And that to me says something. The fact that here we are, we're in the middle of May. It's a 26-year-old and your manager is basically saying, he looks like he needs a day off. I think, just me personally, and I have talked about this ad nauseum on the podcast for my listeners, they know this, but for me personally, I think it's a guy who has gotten off to a bit of a slow start, whether it was because of the knee injury he had in spring training that kind of delayed him. And he knows he's not performing to that MVP level. And this is a guy that wants to be the best. He desires to be the best. And he knows he's not that right now. And so now we've got a situation where he's gotten picked off. He got picked off three times in 2 games. And we got a guy who on 3-0 is swinging and grounding into double plays and force outs. Now we've gotten into a situation where Ronald is trying to hit a 3-run homer. He's trying to hit a 6-run homer every time he comes up to make up for just a lack of play that he's had the past month, really. And we've got a guy who is pressing. And Ronald doesn't need to do that. Ronald needs to just do what he does, and he's going to have the numbers in the end. The bat speed's still there. The new metric that they have on Baseball Savant, all that looks good. The hard hit rate is there. The strikeouts are up is the only thing that really concerns me. That was what made it so special last year. He cut his strikeout rate down a lot, and it's gone back up to where it was before. And so, that would obviously not make him a 9-WAR player anymore. That's going to cut into what he can do. But to me, at this point for Ronald, it seems like a guy that maybe the knee was bothering him a little bit more than he was letting on. And now you got a guy who is pressing, trying to make up for the lost time where he's been in such a slump.
And I think that's a key thing. And I think the Padres fans can relate, by the way, on the pressing thing. I imagine you feel the same. I don't like it when people assume that players don't care. I think that's really dumb. And I think, don't get me wrong, you and I both know there have been athletes that make it to the pros and you can tell they don't care. but it's
Anthony
very
Rendon doesn't want to play baseball.
Yeah, Anthony Rendon. Maybe look, I thought that his comment, I was like, that would work if you were playing. You know what I mean? Nikola Jokic of the NBA can be like, yeah, I care about my kids and horses more. But he plays every game and like plays well, so you could get away with it. But we've seen athletes. Jay Cutler in football, I think, is a famous one, right? I think that overall, though, like Padres fans can relate. Manny Machado, how does he follow it up? I mentioned in the first segment with those grounding into double play to lose the opportunity for them to win the game on Monday. Grounds into double play immediately. Like, that tells me I think he's pressing too. He sees the pressure and he's saying, I want to come back immediately. I think Tatis gets into these moments where instead of looking for walks, some singles, maybe it feels like he's trying to rip the ball into left center field, right? So I think that's something that superstars possibly go through. It's just really wild to see it from him. And I was very shocked when he said that he might be tired. And I think that that's not something people think of when they think baseball. But it absolutely can happen, whether it be mental or physical.
Yeah, I think for him, I think it's more mental. He's just mentally drained. Just because of, everything he's gone through, being the MVP, coming back, wanting to show that, that's who he is. And he's not performing like that. And he's trying too much. Like you said, I mean, he wants those moments. He wants to be in those spots. He wants to get those big hits. He's not shying away from it. It's just he's trying to force them to happen instead of just playing his game. And when he does that, it'll just naturally happen.
So it's actually funny, like the more we talk about this, the Braves and Padres, the difference is the Braves are actually a good baseball team and know what they're doing. But when it comes to the offense, Matt Olson, Michael Harris, Austin Riley, and then, of course, the aforementioned Acuna, like all of these guys, Orlando Arcia, too, like all of these guys haven't been there except for Marcell Ozuna and Travis d'Arnaud seemingly have been, really, really great. And Ozzie Albies has been solid, too. But I guess Padres fans can relate a little bit. A bunch of star players. I just think that one team has shown that those guys usually turn it around, while the other doesn't, is a lot more inconsistent. But I'm curious to see like how that plays out this weekend, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's only a matter of time for this offense. Like I said, there's not a loss in skills for Austin Riley, Matt Olson, Ronald Acuna. Michael Harris is still really young. I think he's just going to get even better. It's just been unfortunate that all these guys have kind of struggled at the same time. You're going to have guys throughout the season who have their ups and downs. But I think for Braves fans, you're hoping, okay, they're having all their down moments right now so that they can be ready for the second half. And to your point, as bad as the offense has been, and it's been bad. I ran the numbers, for the last month now, it's been a bottom 5 offense, but you look at the talent on this team, you're like, how is that possible?
Yeah.
And yet they're still, more than 10 games over 500. They've still found ways to win games, and they've had a really tough schedule. They played a lot of really good teams, and they have a winning record against teams over 500. So, as bad as the offense has been, they're going to turn it around. All these guys are still really good. And when that happens, I think this team's going to take off. Right now people are looking at the Dodgers, the Phillies, the Orioles, the Yankees as the top teams in baseball. Braves have kind of been sliding back in the eyes of many. But once the offense gets going, and hopefully it is this weekend against the Padres, but whenever it may be, this team is going to be right back up there as feared as one of the best teams in baseball.
Yeah. And hot take, I think it's good they're sliding under the radar. As long as the record's good, if I'm a Braves fan, I'm saying, look, we won a World Series not too long ago, right? In case people forgot. And we did that with some of our players hurt, and we're a better team now. So just give it time. I hope everyone keeps talking about New York. Go ahead. The Yankees are famous for not blowing into the postseason. The Dodgers, they're certainly famous for not blowing into the postseason, right? So if I'm a Braves fan, I tell them, hey, as long as the record is sharp, I think it might be a good thing to be a little bit like, like we're going to sneak up on people. But who knows? We'll see how, I guess, this weekend plays out.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Should be a fun matchup. I want to get into more of that here next. We'll look at some of the pitching matchups and see who do we think is going to come out on top. It's a 4-game series, so easy to pick a split. We'll see if me and Javi both go in that direction. We'll discuss it here next. It's a winner-take-all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. In the NBA right now, the Celtics are the favorites to win it all at plus 155. The Knicks, who are in there and winning, I believe, and their matchup right now, they have plus 2,700 odds. Right now in the NHL, it's the Stars who are the favorites at plus 290, with our Tom Glavine's Boston Bruins hanging on at plus 2,700. You want to take the underdog there. And they even have a dedicated tab on FanDuel now for Paul Skeens, who pitches on Friday afternoon. So you want to get in on that action. You got to do it quickly. Last I looked, the over-under on number of strikeouts for Paul Skeens on Friday was 6.5 against the Cubs. So you can check that out over on FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Javi, let's get into the series a little bit this weekend, pitching matchups wise. Matt Waldron versus Max Fried on Friday. Yu Darvish versus Bryce Elder on Saturday. To be determined for the Padres on Saturday against Ronaldo Lopez, and not sure on Monday either. A wraparound series playing an afternoon game on Monday. We know the Braves will throw Chris Sale. You know who's pitching in either of those two last matchups? I've heard maybe Musgrove could come off the IL. Dylan Cease probably pitches in one of those.
Yeah, I think from what I've been looking at, it says Dylan Cease, so maybe that's what they're going to do on Monday. Maybe give Musgrove, have him come back against the Reds, right? Have him come back against the Marlins or the Reds instead of a really tough matchup against the Braves. I don't care how their offense has been so far. Maybe that's what they're thinking. But yeah, either him or Cease to probably close out this series. So you will get a lot of the Padres' best pitchers. In fact, that's the beauty of a 4-game series is you get to see everything. So I'm really excited for it. And we start off with Waldron versus old friend Max Fried, who hurts me every time I see him. Just the definition, I feel like, of a consistency among starting pitchers, right? He's been kind of like a better version of Joe Musgrove in a lot of ways, if not, similar at points. But, they don't necessarily light up the strikeout numbers, but this guy throws complete games. He gives up, not bad contact. He's really good. And then Matt Waldron's side for the Braves fans, he's one of the more back and forth people among Padres fans. I think he's okay. I know that the ERA says that he's got a 5.49 ERA. I know he's 1-5, but that doesn't matter. For me, you'll tell really early on if his knuckleball is going to be on or not. That's one of his main pitches that he goes to. It's not the only thing he throws. Sometimes it's whoa, is the knuckleball back? You know what I mean? And then other times when he pitched against the Diamondbacks from a week ago, he gives up 8 runs. So he's been a little bit inconsistent. And I would also tell Braves fans, he's been very bad the first 3 innings. So it's possible if you see on Friday that the Braves are up by 3 after the first inning, keep in mind Waldron has, for some reason, so far this year, come into his own as the game goes on. So what I'm basically saying is the game isn't over yet. Not to mention this Padres offense that has been pretty good when it feels like it, I guess. So yeah, but I'm excited for all of them. So what do you think?
Yeah, I'm excited about Waldron to see a knuckleball. We just don't see it a lot today. So I'm curious to see what that looks like for a Braves offense that's just struggling to really hit anything at this moment. They've struggled mostly with four-seam fastballs. So I'm curious to see how they handle that knuckleball. And then I know Yu Darvish and Dylan Cease have obviously been very good. I don't think Darvish has given up a run since he's come back off the IL. Hopefully that changes. And I know Dylan Cease leads all of baseball in strikeouts over his last 3 starts. So that's going to be some tough matchups for the Braves. But I just said Max Fried. I mean, he had a couple of rough outings to begin the year, but he has looked like the best version of Max Fried since then. He had a complete game shutout. He's flirted with 2 no-hitters. He's taken a no-hitter through 6 innings and 7 innings here over his last, 3 or 4 starts. Chris Sale's looking like the old Chris Sale. Ronaldo Lopez has looked terrific. The Braves pitching has not been the problem. It's just been the offense. Their starting pitching has been great. After the first couple of weeks of the season, the Bryce Elder versus Yu Darvish matchups, one I look at that's going to be a tough one for the Braves on paper with the way that Darvish has pitched, but should be some fun matchups regardless. Looking forward to seeing all of those. Like I said, a 4-game series, so you're gonna get the best. You're gonna see pretty much everybody in this. I asked you about the Padres bullpen. I know you mentioned Suarez has been locked down, but the Braves bullpen, I know it's very deep. They've been very good. They should be getting Pierce Johnson back this weekend as well to help out. What does the Padres bullpen look like?
The Padres bullpen is kind of fascinating because on the one hand, the talent is there more than it was last year. And I'm not only saying that because of Suarez. Enel De Los Santos has been a nice addition for the team. He's been on a skid lately, though. Yuki Matsui, nice addition for the team, but he's been on a skid recently. The bullpen is it's really weird. Outside Suarez, I think they're still trying to find their footing. They've got this Jeremiah Estrada kid prospect. He gave up some runs the other day, but he's been really good throughout. He throws some heat, so you have to pay attention to that, especially if forcing fastball has been the Braves' issue. And then Adrian Morejon, who, if you've been following the Padres, he's been this kind of like failed experiment for a lot. And his stuff grades out lately as a bullpen guy. In fact, his last outing, I believe he went 3 innings and had 4 strikeouts, no hits. Like, he's been good as a reliever, but if you ask Padres fans, you can't trust the guy, because then he has what happened in this series against the Rockies, where he just gets absolutely tuned up, and we're like, where did this come from? Like, you'd been on a roll, and we were just starting to believe in you. So overall, Padres bullpen has not been great. I can't tell what direction they're going in. I don't know if they're just having a little bit of a regression where it's like Matsui and Santos both had like sub-2 ERAs. Okay. Like, that's probably not going to continue along. Or if it's like, do they need to replace some things? Long term, I'm not too worried, because I like that they actually have replacements for once. Guys in the minors, Strata, who I just mentioned, right? They've got some options. But it's a really unpredictable bullpen. I don't really know what it's going to be like, but it's definitely not bad. I wouldn't call it a bad one. For the Padres pitching, it's been inconsistent with their starters, with Musgrove, and with Michael King, and with Matt Waldron. But you are going to face Darvish here. He's been awesome. I will say, home run fly ball rate currently is 4.5% for Darvish. His FIP, all that stuff, he's good, but it does mean, in my opinion, against a team like the Braves, this could be the like bounce back. He's due to give up some big shots at some point. 4.5% is way too low. So maybe that's what happens in this weekend. I hope not. I hope you save it for later. Please, Darvish, please help us win. But I would keep an eye on that. And then Dylan Cease has basically been just electric every single start, with the exception of his first start of the season and a start he had against the Phillies where he still struck out 8 batters. So that's kind of the pitching breakdown, I guess, for the Padres. But bullpen, I don't know. I need more time to think my opinion of the bullpen, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, because that's a big point for the Braves, because, last year they were great in the first innings. They got off to hot starts. This year it's been in the 7th and 8th inning. They really got to a lot of teams' bullpen. So that's why I kind of bring that up, to see if maybe that'd be an opportunity for the Braves. Yeah, that Darvish-Elder matchup, Elder, I just don't trust him against good offenses. And I know the Padres have been that. So that's a scary matchup for me. But that potentially Cease and Sale matchup on Monday afternoon, I think is going to be the game of the series. Looking forward to watching that one. Should be a fun series. Javi, thanks for joining. We'll see what happens over the weekend. Hopefully we see the Braves offense find some consistency and get going. We'll see if the Padres just find consistency overall in general. Because like I said, it's a very talented team. It's a team that I like, a team that I want to watch and root for, but they can't seem to find that consistency. And hopefully that doesn't begin this weekend. Hopefully it happens after this weekend against the Braves. But either way, looking forward to these 4 games in Atlanta over the weekend. That will do it for this episode of a Locked On Braves and a Locked On Padres. Again, make sure you subscribe to both channels on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.